County of the city of Boston. Attorney General Campbell is absolutely on the cutting edge of leading us. We're very lucky to have her from Massachusetts. Our nation is very fortunate to have you leading our legal fights at this time. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Senator Markey. We're going to turn this over to Congressman Raskin for the next two introductions.
Thank you very much. It's my honor to introduce first the Attorney General of Minnesota, Keith Ellison, who has served faithfully and effectively in that role since 2019. He's in his second term. Prior to that, I had the honor of serving with him in the U.S. House of Representatives. He served 6 terms in the House, 12 years representing Minnesota's 5th congressional district, and had a very productive and effective time there as well. And prior to that, served in the Minnesota State House and was a civil rights attorney. And I just say, Mr. Chairman, I've been in politics long enough to recognize 2 kinds of politicians. I've seen power politicians and I've seen justice politicians. And to me, Keith Ellison is a justice politician through and through, and he's perfectly situated as the Attorney General of Minnesota. Finally, I'm pleased to introduce my new friend, Attorney General Matthew Platkin of New Jersey. He served as AG for the people of New Jersey since 2022. Before that, he was the chief counsel to Governor Murphy, and also had an extensive and successful career in private legal practice as a partner at Lowenstein Sandler in the white-collar criminal defense and business litigation practice groups. And I also want to recognize, I think there are a few other attorneys general who are stopping in today, and the Attorney General for the District of Columbia, Brian Schwab, is here with us, and I want to thank him for joining us for this session as well.
Thank you. Before we turn to our witnesses, let me briefly lay out the mechanics of the meeting. Each witness will have 5 minutes to provide an opening statement. There'll be a round of questions, and each senator and member of Congress will have 5 minutes to ask. So please try to remain close to that schedule if you can. Attorney General Raoul, you may proceed with your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Raskin, members of the committee. Special thanks to my home state Congressman Garcia, who allowed me to share an airplane with him this morning. I'm honored to testify in front of you with my fellow state AG colleagues. The 4 of us, and I recognize AG Schwab, who is here, along with 18 other colleagues, have been engaged in the legal battles of our lives over the last 5 months. In anticipation of this crisis our nation faces, we began our preparation for this over a year ago. Today, I want to speak clearly and factually about 3 specific areas where the Trump administration's actions have had a deeply harmful impact: tariffs, education funding, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. At the outset, let me say that my office very commonly across different presidential administrations, including the first Trump administration, has worked in partnership with federal agencies on criminal matters, consumer protection matters, environmental matters, and I will continue to seek opportunities to do whatever is possible. Under the Constitution and under federal law, the president has enormous power. But in our democracy, there are limits on that power. And we have challenged instances where the administration has clearly crossed the line. Whether or not I disagree with President Trump on his policy agenda, he must act in a lawful way that is consistent with the Constitution and the laws that Congress has enacted. Unfortunately, the president and his administration have chosen, with many of their actions, to ignore the Constitution and federal law. And when constitutional guarantees are ignored, all Americans are at risk. One example of executive overreach impacting nearly every American is the Trump administration's executive orders imposing higher tariffs on most products worldwide. Only Congress has the authority to lay and collect taxes. The administration has attempted to invoke the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA. However, the law applies only when an emergency presents an unusual and extraordinary threat from abroad. This is indeed the first time in American history that a president has imposed tariffs based on IEEPA, and for good reason. It does not give the president the power to impose these tariffs. Two courts have so far examined the merits of these claims, and both have agreed that the imposition of these tariffs is an unlawful use of presidential power. International trade is essential to states' economies. The administration's tariffs hurt small businesses that rely on international imports and will make it more difficult for our residents to purchase the basic goods they need at affordable prices. The administration is also working to attack another critical building block of this country, the education of our children. The total workforce of the Department of Education has been cut in half since January 20. And Secretary McMahon has called layoffs the first step on the road to a total shutdown of the department. Even though both the Department of Education itself and many of its divisions and responsibilities were created and are required to exist under federal law. The administration proposed billions in budget cuts to the department, including slashing funding for after-school programs, teacher training, and student loan forgiveness. It has terminated more than $1 billion in funding for K through 12 schools to respond to the impacts of the COVID pandemic. We continue to fight to preserve funding for all of these essential programs that serve our school children and educators. The administration's attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion has not been limited to our schools. The president's sweeping executive orders and actions attempting to roll back progress on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility knows no bounds. The administration has targeted private sector employers, law firms, university employers. It has eliminated diversity, equity, inclusion programs within the federal government and erased historical resources explaining our country's shared history. We know that the president's claims about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility are simply untrue, factually and legally. Nonetheless, they are harmful. I'm proud to say that my state AG colleagues and I have been tirelessly fighting back against the Trump administration's constitutional and unlawful actions. We are unafraid to defend the rule of law with litigation, legal support, and public communications that are informed, urgent, and unwavering. And we have done so on behalf of all Americans and American institutions. Thank you for inviting me to speak today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, General Raoul. General Campbell.
Thank you, Senator. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the members of the Joint Committee for allowing me the opportunity to testify today, including ranking members from both the House and the Senate. Thank you to my senator for the kind introduction and kind words. And of course, thank you to Representative Raskin, Senator Durbin, for your leadership now and of course in previous years and going forward. I am grateful. I'm also honored to be here alongside my fellow state Democratic AGs, and sadly it is only Democratic AGs that are standing up in this moment in time. It's an honor and privilege to work with them, those who are in attendance today and those, of course, who couldn't attend. We all work together as partners in true collaboration, leaving our egos at the door, and most importantly, rolling up our sleeves to do the work. As the president continues to take reckless and unlawful actions that violate our Constitution and harm our residents, my colleagues and I have been fearlessly stepping up to hold the administration accountable and to protect our residents, our states, and our economies. As state AGs, we serve as chief law enforcement officers for our states, acting as the first line of defense against actions that violate our laws and harm our communities. We take these responsibilities seriously, and we hold not only a president, but frankly anyone accountable who violates our laws and infringes on the rights of our residents. So as President Trump continues to repeatedly disregard the Constitution, break federal law, and flagrantly abuse his power, it is AGs who are holding him to account on behalf of our states and the American people. Indeed, we've been exercising courage to defend the Constitution against the president's assaults and to uphold the rule of law, which this president arrogantly believes he is above. We continue to deliver significant wins, not just for our respective states and our residents, but for our democracy and the rule of law itself. Since the president took office in January, my colleagues and I, state AGs, have filed dozens of legal actions to uphold the rule of law and defend our states. And we're more than espousing the principles of upholding the rule of law. We're putting it into practice every single day, or maybe even developing targets on our backs. When the president tried to illegally cut billions of dollars in funding for life-saving public health research to cure illnesses like childhood cancer and Alzheimer's, we took action immediately and successfully to block those cuts and restore critical funding to our institutions. And when the president tried to illegally cut billions of dollars in funding for vital state services, such as child care, public safety, and transportation, we successfully blocked those cuts too. In each of these cases, the president has attempted to circumvent Congress's power of the purse, as defined in the Constitution, in favor of playing politics with our state services and public health. And that's exactly what state AGs have stopped. And we've secured countless victories for our residents through numerous court orders and injunctions against this administration's illegal actions, protecting our libraries, securing residents' personal data, preserving the integrity of our elections, and so much more. Because our legal systems and our courts, we know, are still working, we will keep at it. Just last week, one of our great judges in Massachusetts, this one happens to have been appointed by President Ronald Reagan, ruled in our favor to restore critical NIH funding with a powerful rebuke against what the judge deemed to be appalling and discriminatory actions of this administration. He didn't mince his words. While President Trump may believe he is accountable to no one, not even the American people, AGs are showing up every day to make it crystal clear that he is sorely mistaken. No one is and should be above the law. In the face of executive orders intended to stoke fear and division, we've also issued guidance affirming the existing rights of our residents, rights that have not and cannot be eliminated by the stroke of a Sharpie, and that remain protected under our state laws, this guidance being equally and just as important as our litigation efforts. Things like the ability to implement initiatives that foster DEI, for our doctors to provide life-saving gender-affirming care, for folks to understand the role of ICE and the difference between our state authority and federal authority when it comes to immigration, and so much more. And not just that, while the federal government has stepped out of certain areas, we've stepped in to fill those voids. We have enhanced our work on consumer protection. We've enhanced and expanded our work on civil rights, on the environment. If anything, we are doing all of this, all while the president seeks to weaken, weaponize, or eliminate altogether various agencies, including the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, DOJ Civil Rights Division, and more. So as state AGs, we've been punching above our weight and playing a vital role in this moment. I often say Massachusetts is small, but I feel like Muhammad Ali in this moment, and I'm going to keep on fighting. And we are fighting for our democracy, our Constitution, a system of checks and balances, the rule of law, and our children and the next generation to come. We serve as frontline defenders of those crucial American institutions, not just for the present moment, but for the generations to come. And we'll continue to fight to uphold the law and protect our residents and recognize the real harm this is causing on folks while we do it. The laid-off federal worker, the sick child now without a potentially life-saving clinical trial, the single mother struggling to afford child care, and so much more. It's an honor and privilege to be here. I serve as the first Black woman Attorney General of Massachusetts, the first woman of color to win statewide office there, and I don't take that honor lightly. It's an honor and privilege to serve. Look forward to answering your questions today. Thank you all for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, General Campbell. I might add, just as a footnote, that this is the committee, when we chaired it under President Biden, that was responsible for the nomination of Ketanji Brown Jackson, the first African-American woman on the U.S. Supreme Court. So we share that celebration with your arrival here today.
Thank you.
Attorney General Ellison, you're no stranger to Capitol Hill. Take it away.
That's right. Thank you, Senator. Thank you to the entire committee, and thank you, Senator Durbin and Representative Raskin and all of you. First of all, I must thank you for inviting us, state AGs, to the most important capital in the world when it comes to the length and the breadth and the strength of American democracy. The United States is the oldest democracy under the same constitution on the planet. So for you to platform us to talk about the work that we're doing now is incredibly important, and we're all very grateful because of it. We're faced with a question of whether this oldest democracy in the world is durable enough to withstand an overreaching executive. And I think the answer is it's durable enough if we're durable enough. I have to start my comments by saying that my friend, Speaker Melissa Hortman, would have been proud to know that this hearing is going on today. She was a woman of great principle and character. I met her when she was a legal aid lawyer in Minnesota in 1997. She represented a woman who was abused and mistreated by her landlord, and she brought a lawsuit against that landlord and won the highest verdict of that time, about $490,000 on behalf of this indigent woman who was absurdly mistreated by her landlord. Melissa followed her strong moral compass to the state legislature, where she and I served together before I went to Congress, and she built a career that was the envy of really anyone who watched her go. She was targeted because she tried to feed the hungry. Universal school meals is a bill that she led and passed in the state of Minnesota. She was targeted because she tried to clothe the naked in the form of our state child tax credit, where she made sure that all families had the sustenance that they needed and reduced child poverty in the state of Minnesota. And she welcomed the stranger. Yes, through her work, we passed, in Minnesota, you get a driver's license if you can prove that you can drive a car. She's the best of us, and her spirit is in the room with us today. Many of the things that Donald Trump has been trying to do by executive order could be done. But one would need to introduce a bill to abolish the Department of Education. You need to introduce a bill to get rid of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. You would need to change the Constitution through the legitimate process that exists to get rid of birthright citizenship enshrined in the 14th Amendment. What you can't do as president is issue an executive order like a edict or a proclamation to just change American laws. And so state AGs, along with many others, have stood up to defend the system of law. In February, state attorney generals sued the administration over illegal executive order that would end federal funding to medical institutions that provide gender-affirming care and potentially criminalize the provision of it. The order violates separation of powers, your powers, the Equal Protections Clause of the Fifth Amendment, the 10th Amendment, and the court later imposed a preliminary injunction that blocks the order in the plaintiff states. In April, we sued the Trump administration over their threats to cut federal funding to Minnesota schools if we did not comply with 2 executive orders purporting to ban transgender children from playing sports in schools, broadly deny the civil rights of transgender people. We sued for 2 reasons. One, they were wrong on the law. The orders and threats violate the separation of powers, the 10th Amendment, and Title IX itself. And we sued because this is bullying, plain and simple. Sometimes countries face a moment like this, a moment when a leader bent on destroying entire communities, instilling fear, trampling the rule of law, comes into power, and the question remains, what will the people of the nation do? At the end of the day, friends, as much as I am proud of the excellent legal work that all of us have done and many people in our community have done, I believe that the true freedom of the American people lies in the hearts of the American people. And if they will stand up, we will endure. This committee can count on state AGs, the ones who believe in liberty and justice for all, to continue to fight. None of us are tired, and we can do this longer than they can do this. The lessons of history tell us that leaders who try to deprive people of their rights don't stop at one community. After they've destroyed one, they will go to another and another and another. These are the moments when you have to say no, especially if the community sees its vulnerability, especially if the community sees a leader who's trying to take opportunity away from children, from sick people, from desperate, impoverished people, and harm entire economies. So allow me to say thank you again to this esteemed body, this Congress, this Senate, and House of Representatives who have brought real meaning to the idea of separation of powers. By holding this hearing today, you are doing something important. You're putting ideas and perspective and maybe a little hope for the future in front of the American people. And I want to say thank you for doing that. Melissa Hortman understood that this was important to do. My fellow AGs and I understand this. And clearly, by your invitation here, you understand this. We will keep fighting for the spirit of American belonging. Thank you.
Thank you, General Ellison. General Platkin from New Jersey.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Senator Durbin and Representative Raskin, for your invitation to testify today. And I want to thank all the members from both the Senate and the House committees for having us and lifting up this work. As I was sort of struck as I was coming in here, the thought about the first time I ever came into the Capitol. My grandfather was a career naval officer and a federal civil servant. Took me here. It happened to be the day Bush v. Gore was decided. I never could have thought then that I'd be sitting here joined by colleagues that I have such tremendous respect for, AGs Raoul, Campbell, Ellison, and Schwab behind us, as well as 18 others who have been fighting systematically now for 5 months against an administration and a president that has been hell-bent on disregarding the law and hurting the residents of our state. As the chief law enforcement officer of New Jersey, it is my job to protect the residents of my state. When anyone violates the law and harms New Jerseyans, I have a constitutional obligation to take action. That's true for opioid distributors and manufacturers who devastated our communities. It's true for social media companies creating a youth mental health crisis. It's true for gun companies profiting off of bloodshed. And yes, it's true for a president who violates the law and hurts people in our states. I know all of my colleagues agree with that. Now, we didn't ask for this fight, but we certainly won't back down from it. So I'd like to highlight briefly 3 ways that this administration's lawlessness and assault on the rule of law has been both unprecedented and deeply damaging to our country. First, this has been discussed, but the administration has flagrantly disregarded the Constitution, as Representative Raskin noted. Just look at the attempt to eliminate birthright citizenship on the very first day of the term. This right was enshrined after we fought a bloody civil war to settle the debate about whether babies born on American soil were in fact citizens of this nation. It's been backed by well over a century of Supreme Court precedent.
Nothing gives the president the power to unilaterally strip citizenship from babies born on American soil. That's why I've been proud to lead a coalition of our colleagues in challenging this unconstitutional order. We won a court ruling that stopped this policy from going into effect, and we defended
Birthright citizenship before the United States Supreme Court last month. We will not back down in the fight to protect this fundamental right guaranteed by the Constitution. Second, this administration has undermined public safety at every turn. Instead of working with us to keep our residents safe, the Trump administration is defunding law enforcement and letting weapons of war back onto our streets. They've threatened to withhold funding for critical law enforcement, counterterrorism, emergency services, and disaster relief work unless states redirect criminal enforcement resources to federal civil immigration enforcement at the expense of combating violent crime, drug trafficking, gun violence, and domestic violence. Just last week, we obtained an injunction barring the administration from withholding billions and billions of dollars of critical transportation funding based on these threats alone. In another move that I candidly never could have imagined I would say, but it's true, the administration secretly tried to legalize machine guns last month. They're planning to distribute thousands of devices known as forced reset triggers, which functionally turn a firearm into a machine gun capable of firing up to 900 rounds a minute, more powerful than an M16 in fully automatic state, into our states. Despite being illegal to possess under federal law and extremely dangerous, they plan to send thousands back into our communities, and they won't even so much as tell us where they're going to go. We are leading lawsuits challenging these unlawful and reckless actions that threaten public safety and put Americans in harm's way. We will not let this administration play political games with the safety of our residents. Third and finally, this administration has shown a blatant disregard for the rule of law. I'm particularly alarmed by the president's attacks on law firms, targeting lawyers for doing their jobs and depriving people their First Amendment right to representation. Now, I believe law firms that have capitulated in the face of these threats will be looked on not so favorably as history evolves, but I'm proud to stand with the lawyers and firms that have fought back against these executive orders. All of this is part of an effort to undermine the rule of law, a concept that I understand can seem abstract to many, myself included. But I assure you it was not abstract to people who called our office wondering if their Medicaid card would be accepted by their doctor when President Trump unlawfully froze the health care of 72 million Americans. It was not abstract for the mother who came up to me in tears at my son's soccer game wondering if her autistic son's services were going to be shut off unlawfully. It's not abstract to the brave law enforcement officers who I've spoken to whose services were unceremoniously slashed overnight. These harms are real. They're affecting millions of residents in a host of unprecedented ways. And plain and simple, my fellow AGs and I will not waver in fighting back against the administration when it violates the law and harms our residents. I thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. Plain and simple, the rule of law and the foundational principles of this nation are worth fighting for, and we're honored to do it. And I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Platkin. At this point, we're going to recognize the Democratic leader of the Senate for an opening statement, and then questioning will start with Chairman Raskin.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Senator Durbin, formerly chairman of the Judiciary Committee, doing a great job as ranking member. And I thank Jamie as well. He's just been such a great leader in so many different ways. So thank you both for holding this hearing, and I welcome my House colleagues. I spent 18 happy years in the House, and reminding me what General Platkin said, we passed the Brady Law and the assault weapons ban, which have served us well. I was the sponsor of them. And now they're trying to undo them. Right in the reconciliation bill, they have first wanted to take away background checks for silencers. And who needs a silencer? Not the police. They don't like this proposal. Not average citizens. It's people who don't want to be detected, criminals. And it's particularly dangerous when they try to do mass shootings and nobody's able to hear the bullets. And then they added, just the other day, they added shotguns and rifles. So what they're doing in terms of machine guns, they're trying to undo 100 years of law. Now, we're going to bird these things, and we think we have a good chance of winning them, but it's just crazy. To all these laws that have helped save lives, that most gun owners support, they're trying to undo, because the right wing runs the Republican Party. But I want to thank our attorneys general for being here, from Illinois and Massachusetts and Minnesota and New Jersey. And we are holding these spotlight hearings, I'm sure Dick and Jamie mentioned this, here in the Senate, because they won't have hearings on the subjects the American people care about. They won't have hearings on just about anything, and then when they have their hearings, they often limit what witnesses we can bring. So we're having these spotlight hearings. We're going to call them shadow hearings, like the shadow cabinet, but that sounded a little shadowy. So instead, we call them spotlight hearings because they put a spotlight on what is going on, and they're often live streamed. Is this one being live streamed? And we get hundreds. Good. Deborah would know. I see a lot of people here who I talk to because of Senate things in the old days. But in any case, The hearings are live streamed, and some of them have gotten hundreds of thousands of people watching. So that's great. We all know President Trump is just continuing to overreach and abuse his power as president, putting our nation at risk. We had a beautiful meeting at one of our caucuses last week. It was sad because of what happened in Minnesota. And our two Minnesota senators got up and talked about it. But at the end, I asked Reverend Warnock, who is still a reverend, as well as a senator, to give him a closing prayer. And he said a line in there that I have now repeated all across New York and the other states that I have visited. Here's what he said. He said that evil always overreaches and contains in itself the seeds of its own destruction. That's what we're doing. That's what we're hearing here. Now, that means we have to fight every day to expose that evil and try to stop that evil whenever we can. But they always overreach and go too far, which they do. So I'd like to thank our two leaders here, Congressman Raskin and Senator Durbin, for doing this. I just want to talk a little bit about litigation in the courts, because each one of you has been involved in litigating against the overreaches, if you will, much worse than that, of the the Trump administration, and the Republicans in the House and Senate as well. And one of the great things we were able to do when we had the majority is we put 235 new judges on the bench. Progressive judges, 2/3 were women, 2/3 were people of color. You're looking at the team that led the charge. And now, because Senator Durbin was great chairman of the Judiciary Committee doing that, and now they are our first line of defense against when the administration, quote, overreaches. And we have won 97% of the rulings in the courts. And to show you how important it is, they wanted to pass some horrible act called the SAVE Act, which would have returned Jim Crow to voter registration. They tried to pass it in the Senate, and they knew they couldn't get the votes because there you needed 60. But they went to the courts. I was the lead plaintiff. I think you were a plaintiff. To do the same thing, and the courts threw it out, as they should have, because our people are the first line of defense. So now he's using his big, beautiful bill as another way to get around either the Senate or the courts. He's so angry. And by the way, this 97%, a chunk of it comes from judges Trump even appointed. But they were upholding the law, and they knew how he was breaking the law. And of course, that lifetime appointment gives him, the retribution that Trump always visits on his opponents. They're immune from it in some ways, although some judges are not. They're attacking the judges. Anyway, we won 97% of the court, so they go to the reconciliation bill. I have good news. This just happened late last night, that they had snuck in a provision that would stop the courts from issuing injunctions altogether. You had to pay a huge bond, which certainly poor people couldn't pay, but even some of the organizations that do this all the time complain to me. We got it thrown out. So that's three things they tried to do to restrict the courts in reconciliation, and we're batting 3 for 3 on nationwide injunctions, on these pay-for-play, and on what the courts, we just got a good ruling on environmental stuff, and they limited what the courts could do there as well. And we're having more success in the committee, in the Byrd process than we had thought we would have, although obviously we don't win everything. But I want to just thank you for being here. You, just like our judges are our first line of defense, you are the people who can seek cases and help us keep this horrible overreach from affecting the American people. And you each have been leaders in that regard. I've worked closely with my Attorney General. I'm a good friend of hers, Tish James. And I welcome you. I thank you for being here. Welcome you to this spotlight hearing, and keep fighting.
Thanks, Senator Schumer. We're going to start with questions with Congressman Raskin.
Thank you very much, Senator Durbin and Senator Schumer. Thanks for joining us and for your powerful leadership on behalf of the rule of law and the Constitution in New York and all over the country. Your citation of Senator Warnock reminds me of something that Ben Franklin said, where he said, I've observed that wrong is always growing more wrong until there's no bearing it anymore, but that right, however opposed, comes right at last. And so
Warnock paraphrased Benjamin Franklin.
well, they were thinking along parallel lines, undoubtedly.
Thank
So,
you, Jamie.
thank you for joining us. I want to recognize my Democratic colleagues who've joined us today. Hank Johnson from Georgia, Ted Lieu from California, Deborah Ross from North Carolina, Chuy Garcia from Illinois, Mary Gay Scanlon from Pennsylvania, and Becca Ballin from Vermont. But I just have a couple of questions for you guys. One is I want to say that when, pursuant to Senator Warnock and Ben Franklin, we get through this nightmare, and we will, and when we reclaim the trajectory of American history for democracy and freedom, and we will, all of you will be remembered by future generations for what you did to stand up for us during this time. And I don't want you to think that anybody doesn't notice, because we do notice what it is you're doing. But I want to ask you this, because in addition to the substantive defense of the rule of law and the Constitution you're engaged in, all of you are also modeling what it means to be an attorney general. Because we've got an attorney general of the United States who literally thinks her job is to be the president's lawyer and to do whatever the president wants her to do, and thinks that the Department of Justice is the law firm for the president and his political party. I mean, that's a remarkable deformation and diversion of American history. So although it's indisputable that all of you are Democrats, I don't think you're here to represent the Democrats or the Democratic Party of your state. And I just wonder if you would say a word about what it means to you to be an attorney general and to try to act on behalf of the rule of law and not a political program. Perhaps Attorney General Raoul, if you'd start.
Thank you for that question. I served as the Attorney General of the state of Illinois, and in Illinois, I am independently elected from the governor, and by way of that, I serve the rule of law. I don't serve the governor. I do represent the governor. I represent the agencies within state, but I serve the rule of law, and I take that distinction very seriously. And I think that the U.S. Attorney General should operate with the same sort of. She shouldn't be loyal to the president, but she should be loyal to the rule of law. That does not mean you're not representing the government and the administration, but you have to do so within the bounds of the rule of law, and we take that very seriously.
Is there any one of you who would describe your job as being the governor's lawyer? Exclusively, and I'm okay. So I don't know if anybody wanted to add anything else on this. Yes, Attorney General Campbell.
I'll just add, similar in Massachusetts, elected by the people, and I'm accountable to the people in upholding the rule of law and protecting their rights and protecting our state's economy. I would just stress, and I think the NIH case, which we were all a part of, whether it's the first case or even the second iteration of that case, to protect access to these critical life-saving medical research, clinical trials. This is billions of dollars that go to every state in the country. We came together not looking at, okay, how do we just protect those who are Democrats or identify as Democrats in this country? We came together recognizing the unlawful actions by this administration to cut that funding. In NIH won quickly on a Friday night and mobilized to show up in court on Monday because we knew what was at stake. When you talk about a child having pediatric cancer or a vet dealing with PTSD, we don't look at whether or not they have a D or an R by their names. We mobilized to advance that litigation to protect the public health, not even only of those folks in our state, but to protect the public health of everyone across this country while at the same time upholding the rule of law. And I think it's just a great example of a great example of how we do our work regardless of political affiliation or even demographic.
Well, thank you for doing that. And Ellison and Platkin, let me just twist the question a little bit. One of the things you guys are doing is defending the integrity of federal laws and programs that we've adopted. And because of the very restrictive standing rules that the court has imposed against Congress going to court to try to get our laws implemented. In a weird way, you're standing up for the laws that we've participated in passing. But that's for all of the people, because after all, it's your representatives in Congress who voted for them as well. But I wonder if you could just reflect a little bit on that role you're playing in terms of making federal law work for everybody in the country as a state attorney general.
Chairman Raskin, we regard the laws that Congress passes as fundamentally the prerogative of the people who populate this country and send members to Congress. And so for an executive to usurp the role of Congress in appropriations or establishment of agencies or anything like that, we view as an outrageous overreach that simply cannot be tolerated. As I noted in my comments, the things that the president is trying to do, you probably can do if you follow the rules, but you cannot do it vis-a-vis executive order or edict or proclamation or this is how I feel this morning. The fact is that there are procedures that they can follow. They got to go to Congress. You want to abolish the Department of Education, as horrible of an idea as I believe that is, you have to go through Congress to do that. So he's not only doing things that I think are harmful to the American people, he's doing them in a way that is harmful to our system of justice and democracy.
Great. And then finally, forgive me.
I was just going to note, Representative Raskin, that what you said at the start of this is the core of many of the lawsuits we filed. Article 1 gives this body the broadest powers, particularly when it comes to passing laws, spending money. And a bulk of the cases we have talked about and have brought have been the president. When we say he can't act like a king, it means he can't take actions that you have done and put into law, signed into law by a president, passed by a Congress, and decide on a whim that he wants to, say, convert a Department of Transportation highway program into an immigration enforcement program. That is not what the Constitution allows. And so our lawsuits have been about standing up in many ways for the authority of this body to do the important work that it does.
Thank you. I want to recount an experience I had in Chicago last Friday, Kwame, and it's not an unusual one, but I went to the immigration court to watch and to listen. And unlike reported in many parts of the media that these gotaways and others are avoiding the reach of the law in the United States, the people who were there were all there because they'd received a legal notice to appear on a status call for their claims to stay in the United States legally. They brought their families with them, and some had attorneys with them, lots of paper and the like. We know what's happening in some of these cases. These people are appearing for hearings, and the government, the federal government, ICE, is standing up and saying, we're dismissing the charges against this individual, so there's no case to consider, and at that point, detain them and deport them to the country, some country where they once lived. There was that fear in the courtroom. The only difference was the leader of the court there told me that when I announced I was coming to the building that day, the ICE agents announced that none of them are going to be around that day, so I didn't see any. Also, many of these ICE agents are masked and are not identified in any way. These people who are being detained and deported don't have any indication of formal rank of this individual, and they're stuck with it. This, to me, is a clear abandonment of basic due process in terms of what's happening to these people. We're not talking about murderers, terrorists, rapists, people with serious mental illness. You remember the litany that's been recounted to us by President Trump over and over. These are people who are trying to follow the law of America and get their day in court. And it's an awesome process to follow. I would like to ask you, each of you, if you've run into similar abuses of due process in your state and have any suggestions of what we ought to be doing.
Thank you, Senator Durbin, for your question. As you know, I'm a child of Haitian immigrants who went through the immigration process in this country and have contributed greatly to this country as have millions of other immigrants who have come to this country, including those who are currently undocumented. The notion that the practices being used in Chicago and other municipalities to have some of those who have been complying with immigration processes and responding to notices to appear and then being detained as a result of them complying with the immigration process is unconscionable, and it is the furthest thing away from what I understand as due process. There's no definition of due process. I know some have tried to indicate that the notion of due process is different in an immigration context as in others. There's no way that such deceptive practices can be defined in any way as due process. As you know, I am defending what we call the Trust Act within the state of Illinois, which makes certain that our law enforcement resources are not misused for immigration enforcement processes. I know the administration has defined their efforts on immigration as to be targeted towards criminals, but the evidence with regards to those detained reflect a different story. And indeed, each and every one of us here have historically collaborated with our federal law enforcement partners on enforcing criminal laws against citizens and non-citizens, and we will continue to do so. But the notion that these deceptive immigration practices can align with what the purported purpose of this more aggressive immigration enforcement effort is the furthest thing from the truth.
I would just say that if you followed, excuse me, if you followed the questioning that had been asked of judicial nominees over the last 2 decades, and I've served on Senate Judiciary during that period of time, it has changed dramatically under the Trump administration. We are now asking nominees to the Department of Justice, even nominees to the bench, whether or not they believe an executive has to follow a court order or whether they can defy a court order. That is so fundamental to due process and rule of law, and yet you ought to hear the answers we're receiving. A lawful court order, they'll say. Well, who decides if it's lawful? Under Marbury, we know it's the court makes that decision. And yet that I think is at the heart of whether we will face a constitutional crisis in this country. At this point, I'll turn over to...
If I could try to respond to your
Sure.
question, Senator, I just wanted to say, for the record, that I have looked for and searched for a law prohibiting ICE or from wearing masks. And I haven't found one. Maybe somebody else is aware of it, but I've looked for it and my research hasn't turned it up. I think that there might be some reasons for a mask in certain situations. There might be health reasons. Certainly during the pandemic, you might see someone wearing a face mask, or maybe there's some undercover reason. But I think that if this body were to pass a law saying you may not wear a mask to hide your face so that you cannot be identified, so you can avoid accountability, I think that would be a good law to pass. That there may be exceptions, and I don't want to foreclose any, but I think in general, the practice must be that if you are upholding the law and operating legitimately and constitutionally, you shouldn't be afraid to hide your face. And if we veer from that, we will see highly unaccountable conduct flow therefrom. So thank you for allowing me to say that.
Thank you, Attorney General Ellison, and there is legislation to that effect that is moving on our side anyway. I recognize Congressman Hank Johnson from the 4th District of Georgia, who's the subcommittee chair of our subcommittee on the courts and intellectual property.
Thank you, Ranking Member Raskin, and I also thank Ranking Member Durbin for calling this Spotlight bicameral forum by which we can call forward the Democratic AGs in this country, some of them, and to explain how you and our congressional allies are fighting to defend the rights to freedom that the American people expect. Democratic attorneys general, thank you for testifying today.